Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montevilla Sewing Center, and today we're talking about the Pfaff Ambition 610. In this video, I'm going to talk about the accessories that are included with your machine. So to start with, you have a nice cover that I don't have right here with me, but it's a nice hard shell cover that protects your machine when you take it places and keeps the dust off when you're not using your machine. I'd always recommend you cover your machine, any machine, sewing machine that you have, cover it when you're not using it. It keeps the dust off and keeps it out of the machine. So we also have the foot control. It's like a pedal. It's kind of like a gas pedal if you think of it that way. It's the more you push on it, the faster you go. That plugs into your machine. And then we're going to set that off to one side. And then you also have your user guide. Now the user guide is great for learning how to use your machine, getting used to it, but also watch all of my videos and you'll get plenty of information that way as well. Okay, then over here we have the accessories. Now to start off with, I need to tell you that your machine has a horizontal spool pin. That means that the spool sits horizontal and the thread spirals off to the side. You can also have it sit upright if your thread tends to want to reel off the side of the spool. But most of the time you have it down, and also you can close the lid when it's down too. So because of that, you want to have spool caps. Now this is a small spool cap. It would be for your small diameter spools like this. Also it would be useful for spools that don't have an end cap. You would put this on. That would help keep your spool onto the spool pin. For your larger spools, you have this spool cap here, and it fits like this. Now, if you have a spool that's slightly less diameter, some of your Gutermann spools are a little bit less diameter, you can turn this around and have it go the other way. So this spool cap is like dual purpose. Okay. Then I was talking about having some of your spools upright sometimes. That's what these felts are for. When you're sewing along and you have a spool and it's spinning as you're sewing and you suddenly stop, you don't want that spool to continue to spin and kind of puddle off some thread. This acts like a brake. That's what this felt is for. And you have two of them because you have this auxiliary spool pin for doing twin needle sewing. I don't have it right here with me, but twin needle sewing is where you use two spools of thread. So this spool pin sits right up here like that. And then you'd use your other spool, and you'd have two spools of thread going down to your twin needles, and your twin needle looks kind of like this. Okay, here's a twin needle right there. Okay, that twin needle doesn't come with this machine, but you can set it up so that you can use a twin needle and do some really nice decorative sewing with that. Okay, and then we have this little springy net here. What this is good for is for springy threads that tend to want to kind of puddle off the spool just sitting there by themselves. So you would put this around the spool of thread and then put this on your machine, and that would help keep that thread from falling off the spool. This is similar to what knitters use around the ball of yarn when they're knitting. They want that to flow right off smoothly and not get tangled up or caught. And it's a similar idea, a net that they put around that. Okay, and then over here we have this wonderful multi-tool. Now this is primarily for going over thick jean seams. Say you're sewing a hem on some jeans and you want to turn that under. A flat felled seam is really thick there. So going over that may be a difficulty because your foot tends to want to kind of get pushed up. So let me show you over here on the machine. Get the IDT out of the way. If I was going to sew over this, the foot would tend to push up like that. What I do with the multi-tools, put that behind the foot, and that kind of levels it out. And that helps as you're sewing for the sewing machine to not bog down at that area, but get past that nice thick seam like that. You have two thicknesses, a thinner area here, and if you have some really thick ones, you can use that for this. Now this is also good for sewing on buttons. You can use your sewing machine to sew on buttons. It's just like a zigzag that stays in one place. What this is good for is if you want a little bit of space between your button and your fabric. It's called a shank, and it helps the buttonhole fit around the button more neatly. This will give you a little bit of a shank. You can zigzag right between those there. Okay. Zigzag is something, or that button fixing is what you'd need to look in your video, your book for. Okay, this also has another neat feature. You see that hole right there at the end? And you notice it has a flat side towards the back. This is wonderful for changing your needle. So you'd put your needle in here so that the flat side is against the flat side on this hole here. And then you use this as a handle to hold your needle up into the area where you put your needle in. It's better, I find it's easier than just simply holding it with my fingers, the needle. This is like a handle for your needle. So, multi-purpose tool, great tool to have. Then we have the quilting bar. Now the quilting bar is meant for sewing nice, even lines of stitches where they're an even distance apart all the way down. I'm going to show you how that goes onto your machine. Your foot holder has a place here in the back where there's a hole there where you can stick that right in there, and there's a screw above it. So loosen that screw a little bit so you can slide that in there. And once you've got it in there where you want it to be, tighten that down. So what you would do is you do your first line of stitches, and then after you're done with that line of stitches, you move this over and you follow that first line of stitches to do your second line of stitches. That's how you get that nice distance. What this is especially good for is if you're doing, say, a crosshatch pattern on your quilting where you've got your upper layer, your batting, and your backing. If you use your IDT, which you can use with this quilting bar, you can do that crosshatch pattern and get those lines of stitching, those lines of straight stitching, nice and even across your quilt. So, really good tool to have. Take that guy out of there, and once you take this out, tighten that little screw down so that it doesn't vibrate loose and get lost. Okay, then we have our cleaning brush. This one got a little bit bent, but the cleaning brush is good for cleaning inside your machine, and we have another video on maintaining your machine, taking care of your machine. That would be for cleaning the lint out from under here. Now, in order to do that, you're going to need to take the needle plate off. That's what this screwdriver is for, right here. This is a nice short screwdriver, fits right underneath there to get those two screws out. Then you've got a longer screwdriver. This is good for changing your needle because you're going to be over here on the side, and you can get a little bit extra torque to change, to unscrew the needle clamp screw. Also, when you change your needle, make sure you tighten it back up a little bit more with this screwdriver. Okay, so here we have the different feet. Now, one of the feet is already on your machine. That's your all-purpose foot, your 0A foot. That's what you do all your, like your straight stitch and your regular zigzag, things like that. Also on your machine, if you push this information button, it's going to tell you for your stitch that you've chosen what foot to use. So for a straight stitch, the 0A foot, which is what we have on the machine right now. I'm going to show you something about the feet. The 0A foot, look how that is on the bottom, and the 1A foot, see how that's a little bit different? The 1A foot has this channel here, so that is good for if you're doing lettering or if you're doing a stitch, a decorative stitch where it puts extra stitches into your fabric. For instance, something like this. We want to sew with this kind of stitch with this foot here that's got that channel in there. And these feet change quite easily. You put it under there. I'm going to get the IDT out of the way. And just lower that right down on there. That's how you change your feet. Okay, and then we have the 2A foot. Now the 2A foot is similar to the 1A foot in that they both have that channel at the bottom, but you notice here it doesn't have that cutout. That cutout is there for the IDT or the walking foot. And there are stitches and threads that you may want to use, like satin stitches where the stitches are very close together, and maybe you have a rayon thread where you don't want that IDT rubbing against that. So for those satin stitches, it calls for the 2A foot. I'm going to give you an example. Let's go with 70 here. Okay, that calls for the 2A foot right there. That's what this one is. And in that case, you would move your IDT out of the way before you put this foot on. Okay, and then we have the blind hem foot. Now a blind hem is a particular way of doing a hem so that it doesn't show on the outside. The stitches don't show on the outside. This is the foot you would use. And the stitch that you would use is either 12 or 13 up there. The book talks about how to do that. It's a fairly simple procedure. It does take a little bit of practice, but once you get it down, it's a breeze. Another nice thing I like about this foot is that you see how you can move this little guide here from side to side. If you line that up with that wire there and you do a zigzag, make sure that your zigzag, of course, doesn't hit that wire, but if you do zigzag at the edge of your woven fabric, your thinly woven fabric, kind of like this cotton here, it will keep the edge of that nice and flat, because that wire that's in there, when it zigzags back and forth across that wire, keeps some slack in your upper thread. So you're going to get a nice, even, flat edge on your zigzag. Okay, and then here's your zipper foot. Now the zipper foot can be put on either side of your machine, either on the left or the right, depending on which side of the zipper you're sewing and how close you want to be to those zipper teeth. Also, this is going to be good for sewing on piping, because piping, you want to get right close to that piping, and you can move your needle over to one side to get right close to that piping. So, and you can see it has two little cutouts for your IDT right there, depending on which side of the foot you put it on. Okay, and this is your buttonhole foot. Now you can make a variety of beautiful buttonholes like this, depending on which buttonhole you choose up here. But this is how you would make the buttonholes. I'm going to have another video on how to do buttonholes, but this makes buttonhole sewing a breeze. And then once you've cut you're sewn your buttonhole, you want to cut the center of your buttonhole so it opens it. That's what we use our seam ripper for. Seam ripper is also good for, like the name implies, you can rip out seams with this. It has a nice sharp point and a little blade right in there where it just slices the threads really easily. Also, it has a cover here. This little cover is nice for giving a little bit extra something to hang on to. Plus, when you set it down, that cover is going to keep it from rolling away because it has these little lugs on the side here. When you're all done, just cover that up and it's ready to store. Then you have 5 bobbins that come with your machine. We have 4 here. That's because 1 is already in the machine. They are a class 15 plastic bobbin. So if you already have bobbins that are the same shape and size, but they're made out of metal, use these instead. Class 15 bobbins. And if you need more than 4 bobbins, you can easily get some more here at Montevilla. We have plenty of them. Also, you don't want to use bobbins that are round at the top or wider or shorter or anything like that, because you may not get very good results with your machine. So make sure you use the correct bobbins for your machine. Class 15 plastic bobbins. And then we have Inspira needles. And Inspira needles are really meant for Pfaff and Pfaff for Inspira. So not that you can't use other brands, but you're going to get the best results with your Pfaff sewing machine using Inspira brand needles. This package contains a variety of needles. You got some universal needles over here in 3 different sizes. 70, which is the finest, 80, which is sort of about medium, and that's what I usually use, and 90, which is a little bit thicker, heavier needle. You've also got a jeans needle, which is also a 90. Now, with jeans, you want to have a good sharp point that goes through that nice thick denim. This is denim. We want to have a nice sharp, especially if you're going through multiple layers. So use your jeans needle for that. And then your stretch needle. That's going to be great for all kinds of knits, including lycra spandex swimwear knit. This is really good for that. It's actually better than your ballpoint needle for those kinds of fabric because it's less likely to skip stitches, your stretch needle. Now, all needles are going to eventually wear out. So if you do a lot of swimwear, eventually you're going to need a new needle. So inspire a brand. If that needle worked great, that size, you can also get a smaller one, like a 75. That also works well too. So, but this is your starter pack of needles. So that's it for your accessories. I hope you found this a helpful video. If you have, give us a thumbs up. And if you have comments or questions, you can leave those in the area down below. We have lots of other videos on this machine and on other machines here at Montevilla Sewing Center, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye.